Welcome to the News Digest. Today's in the episode. Trump rushes to catch up as Putin tests another nuclear weapon and discusses Ukraine with Xi. Ukraine repels massive Russian assault. Some missiles enter NATO airspace. Belgium warns Moscow would be leveled to the ground. EU proposes 12-point peace plan for Ukraine. U.S. President Donald Trump held a meeting with Chinese leader Xi Jinping during the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit. According to Reuters, the meeting lasted 1 hour and 40 minutes. Following the meeting, Trump stated that it was an incredible meeting and many important decisions were made. Trump also noted that he discussed the war in Ukraine with Xi.
Ukraine came up very strongly. We talked about it for a long time, and we're both going to work together to see if we can get something done. We agreed the sides are, locked in and fighting, and sometimes you have to let them fight, I guess. Crazy. But he's going to help us, and we're going to work together on Ukraine.
It was not much said by Trump about Ukraine during a meeting with Xi. A minute of a general timing of 120 minutes, maybe. Ukraine, well, there is war there waiting to be stopped. How? Well, paradoxically, Ukrainians and Putin even agree on that. Yes, we need to address the root cause of this war. The thing is, Putin is that root cause, and he is highly unlikely to grasp that without a long-range Ukrainian arguments and American tomahawks delivered. And there is more to the importance of the meeting per se. Ahead of a meeting between Trump and Xi Jinping, China conducts military exercises near Taiwan with a group of Chinese bombers flying near Taiwan for what China called confrontation exercises. Was a meeting between the two leaders a confrontation exercise or not? We all can guess, after parties start to act accordingly, what has been agreed upon, or not. President Trump has directed the Pentagon to test nuclear weapons for the first time since 1992, citing the need to remain on an equal basis with Russia and China. The move reverses decades of U.S. nuclear policy and drew sharp condemnation from the Kremlin. Details on when or how tests would occur remain unclear. The last U.S. nuclear test was before a 1992 moratorium under President George H.W. Bush. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov called Trump's statement shocking. Russia reacted. President Trump mentioned that other countries are allegedly conducting nuclear weapons tests, but we were not aware that anyone was conducting tests until now. That is all right. Russia is not aware of many things it does not want to be aware of. Amongst such deliberate unawareness cases is the fact Russia started its criminal war in Ukraine. Trump doesn't want to lag behind in weapons testing, especially when trying to catch up with another leader. Putin announced tests of the nuclear-powered underwater drone Poseidon. The Russian dictator first mentioned it back in 2018. A year later, Russia's Ministry of Defense released a video showing tests of Poseidon. 6 years have passed since then. Putin called the recent launch a huge success and assured propagandists that there is no equivalent to the Russian underwater drone. Why Moscow decided to announce a whole series of weapons tests? In our report.
Russia has for the first time managed to activate the nuclear propulsion unit on which the Poseidon drone operated for a certain period, Putin told Kremlin propagandists. According to the Russian dictator, this drone is more powerful than Russia's Sarmat missile, and as usual, has no analogs now or in the future. Incidentally, the dictator once again promised that the heavy silo-based intercontinental ballistic missile RS-28 Sarmat would soon enter combat duty. He has been making this claim with remarkable consistency since 2020.
In June 2023, during a meeting with graduates of military academies, in the near future, Sarmat systems will enter combat duty. Yet in September, Roscosmos head Yuri Borisov claimed they were already on combat duty. In May 2022, the then Roscosmos chief Rogozin promised nearly 50 Sarmats would soon be on combat duty. And in April 2021, the Russian dictator told the Federal Assembly that by the end of 2022, an entire regiment armed with Sarmat ballistic missiles would be on combat duty. From a publication by Defense Express.
If the Kremlin is to be believed, Poseidon tests were conducted just days after the test launch of the Burevestnik cruise missile with a nuclear warhead propulsion unit from the Novaya Zemlya archipelago archipelago in the Barents Sea. The launch was confirmed by the head of Norway's military intelligence service.
The public first learned of the Burevestnik intercontinental cruise missile project in 2018 from Putin's address to the Federal Assembly. The U.S. Analytical Center Nuclear Threat Initiative, citing U.S. intelligence data, reported that between 2017 and 2019, Russia conducted at least 13 Burevestnik tests, but only 2 were partially successful. From a publication in Novaya Gazeta Europe. One launch means nothing. You need a large number of launches to determine if it works, if it's reliable, what it's capable of, and so on. As often happens, a few attempts, then suddenly one succeeds, and it's everything's fine, fear us now. That's not how nuclear deterrence works.
Putin claims the missile's range is unlimited and its flight path unpredictable. He prefers not to recall that the August 2019 Burevestnik test at a range in Arkhangelsk region failed, killing 7 people. In addition to Burevestnik, Russia announced launches of Yars and Sineva intercontinental ballistic missiles from the Plesetsk Cosmodrome during nuclear exercises. All of this is a show of force to disrupt aid to Ukraine, experts believe.
The fact is, these scare tactics are nothing more than information operations. The second Oreshnik launch failed, and Burevestnik flies only in words. Putin is simply recycling ideas from Naryshkin, stolen from the May days of the Cuban Missile Crisis. There is no threat of attacks on NATO. Lavrov's talk of security guarantees from Russia to NATO is part of the Kremlin's information game. For now, Trump is best countering this game in the West with his nuclear submarine. Andriy Kovalenko, head of the Center for Countering Disinformation at the National Security and Defense Council, on Telegram.
The Russian weaponry Putin boasts about does not match its claimed specifications, experts say. Russia's military-industrial complex cannot function without Western components, and import substitution is not helping.
In such situations, a country's fate usually depends on whether it has allies capable of providing strong material support. Russia has none. China sells some components but gives no loans. Russia is now consolidating its last resources, and they are apparently running out. Problems in the military industry were already being discussed a year and a half ago.
This new round of demonstrative saber-rattling is Moscow's response to discussions about possibly supplying U.S. Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine, analysts suggest. For years, Moscow has used training launches and nuclear carrier tests to blackmail the West, reported by Victoria Chistyukina, UATV News.
War is in Russians' genes. We have it, and it won't disappear. Russian dictator Vladimir Putin said this during a visit to a military hospital in Moscow, where he met with wounded soldiers who took part in the invasion of Ukraine. Analysts note that Russia tends to wage major wars roughly every 6 to 7 years. Between 1991 and 2025, the country has been involved in 5 large-scale conflicts. The First Chechen War, the Second Chechen War, the war with Georgia, the war in Syria, and the war in Ukraine. Now the war is slowly coming home, through the soldiers returning from the front. In Russia, the number of hooliganism cases has risen sharply. In the first half of 2025, it increased by 80%. Lawyers and psychologists link this to returning soldiers from the war against Ukraine who struggle to reintegrate into peaceful life. Many resort to violence, threats, or drunken shootings, while courts more often issue suspended sentences to prevent overcrowded prisons. The war against Ukraine rages on. In the early hours of October 30th, Ukrainian forces fought off yet another massive Russian assault, targeting energy facilities across the country. The strikes triggered emergency blackouts in most regions. Russia unleashed more than 650 drones and over 50 missiles of various types. Radar data showed that some missiles even crossed into Moldovan and Romanian airspace, while Poland scrambled 3 F-16 fighter jets to intercept potential threats. On October 28th, Polish fighter jets intercepted a Russian Il-20 plane flying over the Baltic Sea with its transponder switched off and no flight plan filed, Reuters reported, citing the Polish armed forces. Although the plane did not violate Polish airspace, the incident has heightened concern among NATO's eastern flank countries, which remain on high alert amid increasing Russian air activity near their borders. The Il-20 is a military reconnaissance aircraft that Russia frequently uses for intelligence missions along NATO's borders. Experts warn that such dark flights, conducted without active transponders, pose serious risks of mid-air incidents in international airspace. Unknown drones have been spotted near key military sites in Estonia and Belgium. In Estonia, one of such drones was shot down near a military town on October 17th. In Belgium, multiple drones hovered over the Marsh and Fayman military base on October 25th. Defense Minister Theo Franken called it a deliberate operation targeting critical military infrastructure, signaling the growing risk of espionage or sabotage.
Russian aggression has escalated. It's extended even further into the West. Each month, Ukraine suffers more drones launched in attack. And last month we saw 19 cross the Polish border. Days later we saw Russian jets violate Estonian airspace. And while at the same time Russia mounted a concerted campaign to subvert Moldovan elections. Here at home, we continue to defend ourselves daily against threats that range from the seabed to cyberspace.
Belgian Defense Minister Theo Franken warned that if Russian dictator Vladimir Putin were to attack the capital of a NATO country, such as Brussels, Moscow would be leveled to the ground. He made the remarks in an interview with De Morgan on October 27th, emphasizing that the West must not yield to intimidation by Russia. Asked whether he feared a non-nuclear missile strike on Brussels, Franken said no, explaining that such an attack would target the heart of NATO and would provoke a devastating response against Moscow. The Russian embassy in Belgium condemned Franken's statements as provocative and irresponsible, claiming they are detached from reality and reflect rising military hysteria in Europe. The embassy also accused the minister of Russophobia, arguing that such rhetoric could push Europe toward a new war. A new 12-point European peace plan for Ukraine, initiated by Finland, outlines 2 phases: ceasefire and negotiations. It is a working document of the Coalition of the Willing, comprising around 30 countries. Key points include: Ukraine and Russia signed a non-aggression pact. Kyiv avoids military attempts to reclaim occupied regions. Establishment of security zones along the front line with multinational monitoring. Zaporizhia nuclear plant placed under third-party control with gradual return to Ukraine. Exchange of prisoners and return of kidnapped children. Confidence-building measures and selective symbolic sanctions to support peace. Gradual reintegration of Russia into international organizations. Creation of a peace council headed by Trump to oversee implementation of the plan. Security guarantees for Ukraine from the Coalition of the Willing and the U.S. Ukraine's reconstruction funded partly by frozen Russian assets, approximately 200 billion euros. Gradual lifting of sanctions as the plan progresses, with a rapid response mechanism if Russia attacks again. That's it for today's News Digest. Stay sharp, stay informed, and keep watching us for the latest updates. Goodbye.